It was a Tuesday morning at the Washington field office. Gray skies outside, coffee machines sputtering, the usual rhythm of paperwork and surveillance chatter echoing through the fourth floor. No one noticed the envelope at first. It wasn't marked urgent. No return address. Just an off-white, legal-sized envelope with old handwriting, slanted slightly, like someone with a nervous hand had written it. The mailroom clerk almost tossed it into the miscellaneous bin. But something about the way the ink bled into the paper, like it had been written with pressure and panic, caught her eye. She walked it upstairs. Agent Mara Callan was knee-deep in a cyber fraud case when the envelope landed on her desk. She opened it without thinking. No bomb threat, no suspicious weight. And inside was a letter, typewritten, neat margins, and at the top, in all caps, Confession to murder. Her first thought was hoax, but that thought didn't last long. The letter went on to describe in detail a murder that hadn't happened yet. The date, 2 days from now. The victim, a woman named Sylvia Harrow, age 46, elementary school teacher, lives alone in a cul-de-sac in Germantown, Maryland. The weapon, a hunting knife. Time of death, 2:34 a.m. The letter even described where the body would be found. In the kitchen, slumped over the sink, window open, music playing, and at the bottom a signature, Leonard Griffin. The problem was, Leonard Griffin was already in prison, had been for the past 6 years, convicted of assault, robbery, no murders on his record, currently serving time at the Green Valley Correctional Facility, 2 states away. Agent Callan stared at the paper for a long moment, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. She cross-checked the system. Yes, Leonard Griffin was still incarcerated. No scheduled release, no furloughs, no visitors in 3 months, no phone activity in weeks. But the postmark on the envelope, mailed from Washington, D.C., just 3 days ago, from outside prison walls. She escalated it. Her supervisor, Agent Brent Holbrook, reviewed the letter and raised his eyebrows. You sure this isn't some twisted creative writing project? But even he could feel something was off. Too detailed, too precise. They notified local law enforcement in Germantown and set up a quiet protective watch outside Sylvia Harrow's house. They didn't tell her the full story, just that there'd been a vague threat. Sylvia, unaware of how detailed that threat really was, thanked them and went on with her evening. The first night, nothing happened. She baked cookies, watched a game show, went to bed at 11. Officers sat in an unmarked car down the street. But on the second night, 2:34 a.m. exactly, something did happen. The window in the kitchen creaked open. The music player in the living room turned on by itself, old jazz streaming softly through the speakers. The sound of a knife falling to the tiled floor shattered the quiet. But no intruder, no footprints. The back gate had been unlatched, but the officers watching said no one had entered or left. They searched the yard, the home, the basement. Sylvia was shaken but unharmed. And then they found the second letter, this time tucked behind the microwave. Same typewriter font, same signature, Leonard Griffin. It read, failed attempt. Window too noisy. We'll try again when quieter. Let her rest for now. That was it. 2 sentences. A taunt? A threat? A schedule? Either way, this had just gone from unsettling to impossible. Agent Callan demanded a transfer order. The next day, she and Agent Holbrook visited Leonard Griffin in person. When they entered the visitation room at Green Valley Prison, he was already seated. Thin, mid-50s, calm, like he was expecting them. You got the letters? He asked. They didn't answer. He smirked. I'm not crazy, you know? I'm not the one doing it. Callan sat down across from him. Then who is? Leonard leaned forward, lowered his voice. Let's just say, I dream real loud, and someone out there's listening. Holbrook interrupted. You're saying someone's carrying out crimes based on your dreams? Leonard nodded slowly. Not just mine. There are others. But I'm the first to confess. Callan asked, why Sylvia Harrow? Do you know her? No, Leonard said. Not in life. Only in sleep. Then he leaned back and added, "Tell her to close the blinds. It gets messy next time." They cut the meeting short and left the prison with more questions than answers. How did Leonard know details about Sylvia's home? How were letters leaving the prison postmarked from Washington, D.C.? And why was he so calm, unless he was truly insane or telling the truth? That night, another envelope appeared. This one at the Baltimore field office. Different handwriting, different prison, different signature, different target, but same font, same eerie calm. It read, "I'm sorry, it's happening again." Agent Mara Callan couldn't sleep, not after the second letter, not after Leonard's smirk, not after his whispered warning about the blinds, because that meant he wasn't just guessing. He was watching, or someone was watching for him, and now it was no longer just a game of prediction, it was a live broadcast from inside a nightmare. And the worst part was that Leonard Griffin had no phone privileges, no internet access, and yet the contents of those letters were evolving in real time, reacting to law enforcement, to Sylvia's actions, and now, someone else had joined in, someone from another prison entirely, another inmate from across state lines, a different confession, different handwriting, different signature, but the same typewritten font, the same mechanical rhythm, the same impossible knowledge of future crimes. And this second letter wasn't about Sylvia. It was about a young man in Baltimore named Jared Sykes, a 28-year-old software developer with no criminal record, no known enemies, who lived in a second-story apartment over a bookstore and liked puzzles, jazz, and collecting old coins. And the letter had every detail, right down to the exact date he'd pick up his dry cleaning and the time he'd sit down to eat dinner on Friday. And in the final line it said, "He won't finish his meal. Signed, Thomas Delvin, prisoner at Ashbridge Correctional Facility, serving time for drug trafficking. No history of violence, never met Jared Sykes, not even in passing, no way to know him." And yet, just like Sylvia's case, Jared's home was placed under quiet surveillance, and Friday came, and at exactly 7:12 p.m., Jared sat down to eat a microwaved pasta dinner, and at 7:14 p.m., the power in his apartment flickered, the security camera on his hallway cut out for 13 seconds, and when it came back, Jared was gone. No signs of forced entry, no broken window, no struggle, just an overturned chair and the smell of burnt plastic, like someone had shorted something on purpose. And next to the steaming food tray was a third letter, printed and folded in half, just like the others, and it read, "Two down. Are you ready for the third?" And that's when the Bureau created a task force, Project Oracle, a name pulled from mythology because that's what this felt like, prophecy through confessions, and Callan was placed in charge, coordinating with cybercrime, behavioral analysis, postal tracking, and prison security, because the number one question now was not how, but who and why and how many more, because this couldn't just be Leonard and Thomas, it felt bigger, coordinated, systemic. And when they dug into prison mail logs, they found something chilling. Dozens of letters flagged over the past 5 years from inmates all across the eastern United States, flagged as disturbing fiction or delusional writing, all dismissed as harmless ramblings from bored men with too much time. But when cross-referenced against unsolved cases, some of those letters matched crimes that happened weeks or months after they were written, matched them with uncanny detail, sometimes word for word, including one letter from a prison in upstate New York in 2021 that described the drowning of a woman in Vermont before it was reported. Another from Georgia about a car bombing in Tennessee, all ignored, all lost in the system, and now they were beginning to see a pattern. Not just in the letters, but in the timing, the phrasing, the typewriters used, as if someone or something was orchestrating it all from within the cracks of the system. And then came the fourth letter, this time not sent by mail, but hand-delivered by a guard at Green Valley, the same prison holding Leonard, a guard who claimed a man in solitary had passed it to him during lunch distribution, slipped it through the slot with a blank stare and no words. And that man was not Leonard, not even in the same wing. It was a prisoner named Carl Henning, a former high school teacher serving time for embezzlement, never violent, kept to himself, diagnosed with mild schizophrenia but non-threatening. And the letter, once again, was typed, precise, and chilling. It listed the name of a 10-year-old girl in Virginia, Malia Trask, and stated she would vanish from a shopping mall on Sunday at 3:03 p.m., wearing a yellow backpack, last seen near a bookstore. And Agent Callan felt something unravel inside her when she read that letter, because it wasn't the details that got her. It was the final sentence, typed in red. "You know where to find her, but will you get there in time?" And it wasn't addressed to the FBI, it was addressed to Mara Callan personally, by name, first and last, and that was impossible. She had no connection to this inmate, no visits logged, no correspondence, nothing, and yet somehow, someone on the inside knew who she was, and worse, they knew she'd be the one reading it, and on Sunday they deployed a full team to the Norfolk Galleria, plainclothes officers stationed at every entrance, facial recognition scanning. All foot traffic, and at 2:59 p.m., a girl matching Malia's description entered the mall with her mother, yellow backpack, braided hair, and by 3:02 p.m. she asked to use the restroom alone, and that was the last time anyone saw her because the cameras in the restroom corridor blinked off for exactly 27 seconds, and when they came back, Malia was gone, vanished like vapor, no one seen entering or exiting, no janitors, no strangers, just empty air. And what made it worse was that in the lost, found bin outside the restroom was another letter, addressed in the same font, same tone, and this one simply said, 3, will you listen now? And this was no longer just a pattern, it was a countdown, and it felt like something worse was coming, and Callan, who never cried at cases, who had held dying witnesses and interrogated killers with ice in her veins, sat in her car and shook for 20 minutes, because this wasn't just a case of predictive crime. This was a war against their ability to stop it, like someone was rewriting time just out of reach, using men behind bars as puppets or prophets. And when she returned to HQ, she found a package on her desk. Not a letter, but a small brown box, postmarked from inside the bureau itself. No postage, hand-delivered, and inside was a flash drive with one file on it, titled Oracle_Wave. And when she played it, her screen stayed black, but a voice, distorted, synthetic, spoke through her speakers, not shouting, not whispering, just clear and steady. Stop hunting the ghosts. Start asking why they're speaking. And then a pause, static, and the voice added, next time, one of you. And then the feed cut, and Callan realized, with a cold certainty deep in her bones, that they weren't just receiving these messages. They were being watched, manipulated, pulled deeper into something far older, far wider than they had imagined. And that this wasn't the end of the pattern, but the midpoint, because somewhere out there, someone was writing the next letter right now, and she had no idea whose name would be on it. He had been there the whole time. That was the thought Agent Mara Callan couldn't shake as she watched the security footage from the prison library 3 months ago, where Leonard Griffin sat quietly at a table near the window, leafing through an old medical almanac with surgical precision, and 10 feet away sat Thomas Delvin, eyes scanning a paperback thriller but glancing up every few seconds, not at the book, not at the door, but at Griffin, like a student studying a master, and 2 tables. Over, half obscured by a rolling cart of returned books, was Carl Henning, scribbling notes on prison-issue paper while his lips moved in a near whisper. And on that same footage, the timestamp frozen at 2:38 p.m., the camera glitched for 3 frames, static distortion, nothing much, nothing noticeable unless you'd been trained to look for manipulations, and when Mara rewound it again and again, she saw it, just for a blink, a frame. Someone was standing behind the cart that shouldn't have been. There, tall, in dark clothing, no prison ID, no name on record, no reason to be in the library that day, and yet there he was, present like a shadow pretending to be human. And when she froze that frame and enhanced it as much as bureau tech would allow, she could just make out what looked like a badge hanging from the man's chest. But it wasn't an FBI badge or prison staff, it was something older, worn, untraceable, the symbol on it circular and vaguely serpentine, and that's when the internal server lit up with an alert from the New York field office. Another letter had arrived, same font, same tone, same impossible accuracy, but this time it didn't describe a crime, it described an investigation, their investigation, and it outlined Project Oracle's last 3 months of surveillance, coordination, interviews, and it named every agent on the team in perfect order, including Mara Callan, including the temporary intern who joined for just 2 weeks and then left, and the final line said, "And yet you still think it's about the prisoners." And it was signed not by a name, but by a symbol, the same serpent loop she saw on the badge, and the rest of the task force froze because this was the first time they realized it wasn't just predictive or manipulative. It was invasive, surgical, precise like a scalpel slicing through their systems. And then came the second message, not typed, but spoken, a voicemail left on Mara's private line. The number never shared outside internal networks, and the voice was distorted again but different from before, less robotic, more patient, like someone calmly reciting a bedtime story, and it said, "You're trying to stop an echo, Agent Callan, but what you don't see is that the scream hasn't happened yet." And that same day, the prison systems at Green Valley experienced a full blackout for 43 minutes. Every camera, every lock, every server down, and when they restored power and checked Leonard Griffin's cell, they found him slumped against the back wall, eyes open, unmoving, and on the floor beside him, written in blood, his own, were 4 words. He finally arrived. Watch. And on the wall behind him, painted with that same blood, was the looped serpent symbol, crudely drawn but unmistakable. And this wasn't a suicide, not the way it looked, because the medical report showed a substance in his bloodstream not part of any known prison stash or chemical compound. Something foreign, fast-acting, designed to simulate heart failure while paralyzing the vocal cords, a kill switch with style, and the flash drive found under his mattress had one file, a video of static and then slowly grainy black and white footage of a hospital hallway, old VHS quality, timestamp 1984, and in that footage, a teenage version of Carl Henning walks into frame, escorted by a nurse, past a man sitting in a wheelchair by the window, and as they pass, the man looks up and it's Leonard Griffin, unmistakably him, younger but with that same cold stare, same scar under the left eye, and it made no sense. Leonard would have been 21 in 1984, and yet the footage was authentic, archived from a now-defunct psychiatric ward in Maine, and the file metadata showed it was created 2 years before the FBI's founding of Project Oracle. And that's when it hit Mara. This wasn't a case, it was a timeline, something that looped and folded back on itself like a snake eating its own tail, and everyone they thought was a pawn might have been a piece of something recursive, something fed by belief, by observation, by the act of being investigated, and then a final blow. The letters stopped, for days, then a week, then 2, complete silence, and the Bureau's grip loosened, surveillance cooled, agents reassigned. But Mara couldn't let go, not with the flash drive's final audio clip echoing in her dreams. It's your turn to speak now. And she did. She went to the press, leaked parts of the investigation anonymously, hoping to provoke, to flush something out, and then, a month later, on the anniversary of Sylvia's disappearance, she received a package at her front door. No return address, no postage, just a small wooden box and inside it, a miniature cassette recorder, old school, dusty, preloaded with one message. A child's voice whispering, "Are you watching now?" And then silence, and then the unmistakable creak of her own front door opening on the tape, recorded from inside her house. And that's when she called backup, rushed inside, gun drawn, and found her bedroom mirror shattered, and on the wall behind it, etched into the plaster with something sharp. He confessed to the FBI before the crime even happened. And it hit her like a freight train. This was never about stopping crimes. It was about creating them, looping them, embedding them in memory, in documentation, in belief, because every time they read a letter, investigated a lead, followed a clue, they gave it power, shape, reality, like actors in a script they couldn't deviate from. And now she wasn't a hunter anymore. She was part of the script, her name inked into a letter that hadn't arrived yet. A confession. She hadn't written, describing a crime she hadn't committed, but soon would, because the system was already moving, the next confession already sealed. And somewhere in the dark, a typewriter was clacking away, not predicting what would happen, but ensuring that it did. If this story shocked you, subscribe for more true crime stories that sound unbelievable, but are 100% true.